When we talk about Identity 5, there's always that one honorable guest in the room saying, "Wait, isn't this just Dead by Daylight on mobile?" Truth to be told, I get why people say that. Both games' mechanics are pretty similar. One person chases, the others run around fixing things while screaming internally. And not just that, if you observe closely, even the items and maps feel like cousins at a family reunion. There's Palette, there's Sacred Heart Hospital, and there are people who scream that the game is imbalanced. Those people always exist, not gonna lie. And because of that, a lot of players from both fandoms, well, mostly from the DBD fandom though, have been saying Identity 5 is basically DBD's younger sibling. Or if you want to put it bluntly, the cheap copy of DBD. But hey, is it really that simple? To add some spices into this, just this week, people on Discord and Twitter started talking about another game called Supernatural Squad. The problem? Well, this one looks a lot like Identity 5. Some even say it's a straight-up copy. So now we've got Dead by Daylight, Identity 5, and Supernatural Squad. It's like three siblings fighting over who came up with the cool idea first. Honestly, it's a pretty fun topic, and I thought I'd dive into it with you all today. Quick disclaimer before we get into it. This video isn't about bashing any of the games. I'll try to keep things as fair as possible. And if I get something wrong, or miss a detail, feel free to let me know in the comments. Also, if I accidentally step on anyone's fandom feelings, I'm sorry in advance. I promise I'm not here to start a World War III in the comments section. Let's start with Dead by Daylight, the game that basically kicked off the whole genre. It was developed by Behavior Interactive and released in June 2016. Now, technically, asymmetrical horror wasn't brand new at the time. Games like Left 4 Dead had already dipped a toe into the idea, but Dead by Daylight is considered to be the one that really blew it up. It's simple, scary, and, depending on your luck, either really fun or really frustrating. The premise of the game is quite simple. One player is the killer, and 4 others are survivors trying to escape. Easy enough. Except the killer is basically a horror movie villain on steroids, and the survivors are, well, just regular people who apparently forgot how to fight back. Your best defense in the game is not a weapon. It's fixing 5 noisy generators that conveniently alert the killer to your location. Totally fair, eh? Now, believe it or not, Dead by Daylight actually has lore. Yep, it's not just running around in circles and screaming. The story goes like this. There's this ancient, cosmic being called the Entity that feeds on pain and suffering. Because apparently Netflix wasn't enough, it entertains itself by summoning killers and survivors into its realm for an endless game of tag, but with way more screaming and way fewer safe words. On the survivor side, you've got your classic horror movie lineup. The tough guys, the final girls, and basically anyone you'd expect to make it past the first act of a slasher film. Meanwhile, the killers? Oh, just the greatest hits of horror legends. We're talking Michael Myers, Freddy Krueger, Pyramid Head, Ghostface, and, whoever the heck they are, I don't know. It's like the Avengers, but everyone's trying to murder you. Gameplay is where the real chaos begins. Survivors have to repair 5 generators, which, by the way, sound like broken lawnmowers, trying to power up the exit gates, while the killer's main job is to ruin their day. Survivors can work together, pull off heroic rescues, or, on occasion, throw their teammates under the bus by pointing at the locker their friend's hiding in, so the killer goes after them instead. Killers, on the other hand, spend their time predicting survivors' moves, blocking escape routes, and sighing deeply every time someone shows up with a flashlight. One feature fans love, and occasionally love to argue about, is the perk system. Both killers and survivors can equip perks that give them unique advantages, all like running faster after a rescue, hiding your aura, or making the killer's footsteps harder to track. The variety keeps matches from ever feeling identical. Of course, some players debate whether the perk system leans into pay-to-win territory, but at the end of the day, it's what keeps the gameplay fresh. Another big reason Dead by Daylight has stuck around is its horror crossovers. This game has basically become a hub for horror franchises. We're talking Michael Myers, Freddy Krueger, Pyramid Head, Ghostface, and even characters from Stranger Things. These collaborations pull in fans from outside the game and make each new chapter feel like an event. And yes, it doesn't shy away from gore. Blood, sacrifices, the whole deal. This level of violence is also why the game has been banned in some regions, including India and China. That last one is especially interesting, because China's restrictions later gave rise to another game we'll talk about in a bit. Identity 5. As for the community, Dead by Daylight has grown into one of the biggest names in asymmetrical horror. Sure, it has its fair share of complaints, bugs, balancing debates, and matchmaking issues, but the fact remains, it's the standard bearer of the genre. For many players, Dead by Daylight is the game that comes to mind when you mention asymmetrical horror. In short, Dead by Daylight didn't invent every piece of the formula, but it put everything together in a way that worked, and the success of that formula opened the door for other games to experiment, which brings us to the next one, Identity 5. If Dead by Daylight is the gritty horror blockbuster of this genre, then Identity 5 is its gothic cousin who shows up to the family reunion dressed like they just stepped out of a Tim Burton movie. Released in 2018 by NetEase, Identity 5 quickly carved out a space for itself, not just as a DBD clone, which is how it was often described at first, but as a game with its own charm, quirks, and a fanbase that treats it less like a horror game and more like a fashion simulator. I mean, where else can you get a hunter as cute as Hello Kitty?
These nuts.
At its core, Identity 5 works almost the same way. 1 hunter, 4 survivors, and a full blown of chaos. Survivors decode cipher machines to open the gates and escape, while the hunter tries to stop them by smacking people around with weapons ranging from swords to stuffed sharks. Also, instead of hanging victims on meat hooks, hunters sit survivors on rocket chairs. Think of it as a cuter, PG-friendly version of the sacrificial hook. What makes Identity 5 stand out, though, is its aesthetic. Characters have stitched faces and doll-like proportions. Survivors sport button eyes instead of real ones, which somehow makes them look even cuter. The game's backstories lean way more into dark fairy tales than raw slasher horror. Some maps are brighter than those in Dead by Daylight, and even the darker ones retain a whimsical charm. Generally, the whole vibe is spooky, but in an adorable, storybook kind of way, more like a grim fairy tale than a horror movie, if you know what I mean. Speaking of storybooks, Identity 5 does something Dead by Daylight mostly skips over: deep lore. Instead of just telling you, here's a killer, here's a survivor, Identity 5 drops you into a full-blown mystery about, well, everything. On the surface, the story follows a detective named Orpheus, who goes to a creepy, abandoned manor to locate a missing girl. As you go deeper, you'll find that every character in the game is entangled with this one detective in a way that will give you a headache more than watching your teammate get terror-shocked within 10 seconds. Seriously, survivors and hunters in this game aren't just for looks. They have their own personalities, tragic pasts, broken dreams, and enough drama to power several soap operas. Some fans even play Identity 5 less for the gameplay and more for unraveling the lore, like detectives, piecing together clues and hidden notes about who's lying, who's cursed, and who's secretly dead. As for the gameplay, Identity 5 also brings its own twists. Survivors aren't carbon copies. They have unique abilities tied to their roles, like a mechanic who decodes faster, a lawyer who can read maps, or an enchantress who stuns hunters into rage quitting. Hunters, meanwhile, range from a creepy but tragic spider woman, to a beautiful opera singer, to a faceless eldritch horror. The tone of Identity 5 is a bit of a paradox. On one hand, it leans heavily into tragedy and gothic horror. On the other, the art style and animations can feel almost playful. It's not unusual for a match to swing from a tense chase scene to something that looks like slapstick comedy, complete with survivors, vaulting windows like circus clowns while hunters trip over pallets. And, of course, the community is massive, especially in Asia. The game even has esports tournaments where teams pull off coordinated rescues and cipher rushes that make casual players look like they're still playing the tutorial. Between the lore, the characters, and the competitive scene, Identity V has long since proven that it's not just a clone of Dead by Daylight. It's its own bizarre, dramatic, and oddly lovable universe. On top of all that, there's an actual connection between Dead by Daylight and Identity V. While some people, to this day, still accuse Identity V of copying DBD, they don't realize that the Dead by Daylight team gave its green light for Identity V to use their game, mechanics, and even served as consultants. In short, the DBD developers knew about the game, and even helped the Identity V team realize their vision into what we know. We'll talk about this one in the later part of the video. Now, here's where things get really interesting. See, Dead by Daylight and Identity V aren't the only games rocking the 4 survivors versus 1 killer setup. Once DBD showed the world this formula could work, a whole wave of games decided to give it a spin. We got Friday the 13th, Home, Sweet Home, Online, and even Resident Evil. Yep, the big name Resident Evil also comes off with their spin-off, Resident Evil Resistance, which introduced this kind of gameplay. And it didn't stop there. Some games even tucked this format in as an extra game mode, like a little side dish next to the main course. Roblox has done it, and more recently, so has the title we're about to focus on, Supernatural Squad. According to Steam and TapTap, Supernatural Squad is a co-op multiplayer adventure game rooted in Chinese horror folklore. The premise is quite nice, to be honest. You and your friends explore ancient ruins filled with lost treasures, while all sorts of monsters and ghosts are waiting in the shadows to ruin your day. Your job is simple on paper. Find the treasure, don't get eaten. The game was developed by Night Studios and first launched in December 2024, quickly finding an audience in China. Instead of grim graphics or gothic paintings, it uses chibi-style characters who run around spooky ruins, which gives it this weird mix of adorable and thrilling. It's kind of like watching a group of plushies go ghost hunting. At its core, the main gameplay leans more toward titles like Lethal Company or Phasmophobia, where you explore creepy environments, gather resources, and try to survive against whatever supernatural force is chasing you. Full disclosure though, I haven't personally played Lethal Company or Phasmophobia, so I can only compare based on how it looks, but the vibes are definitely similar. Now, here's where it gets spicy. Recently, Supernatural Squad added a brand new mode that mirrors the same mechanics we've seen in Dead by Daylight and Identity V. Yep, the good old formula. One powerful monster versus a group of weaker survivors scrambling to escape. On one hand, this makes sense. After all, lots of games borrow this setup because it's proven fun. On the other hand, well, this is where controversy starts bubbling. Some players have accused Supernatural Squad of copying elements directly from Identity V, and it's definitely sparked discussion online. After all, it's one thing to use a popular formula, but once specific details start looking too similar, people notice, and they will definitely talk. When it comes to Dead by Daylight and Identity V, there's still a surprising number of people who don't know that DBD actually helped shape Identity V in the first place. According to Idvclue on Twitter, a pretty reliable source for Identity V news, there's proof that NetEase worked directly with Behavior Interactive before launching the game. Out of courtesy, I won't dive into every detail here, but if you're curious, I've linked the full thread in the video description. The short version is this. The Identity V team consulted the DBD team before release, and Behavior gave them the green light. Not only did they grant consent for certain gameplay mechanics to be used, but they also acted as gameplay consultants. So in this case, DBD wasn't blindsided. Identity V wasn't a copycat. It was more like the younger sibling who got official permission to borrow the family recipe. Supernatural Squad, however, is a bit more complicated. There have been accusations floating around that the game borrows too much from Identity V, not just in mechanics, but even in character designs. Once again, I won't be going into the details here for courtesy reasons, but if you want to dig deeper, you can check Idvclue's coverage on Twitter, or just look up Supernatural Squad gameplay on YouTube and judge for yourself. From what's being discussed, the IDV community has presented examples they believe show clear similarities. Some even claim direct copying. Whether that's accurate or not, I'll leave it up to you to decide after looking into it yourself. As of the time I'm making this video, I haven't seen any official escalation from either Identity V's developers or Supernatural Squad. For now, it seems to mostly be a fandom-level debate. That said, the discussion itself has been buzzing in the IDV community. Still, there are people saying that this kind of overlap happens more often in the Chinese market, but I can't really confirm if that's true. Maybe if you're from China, you can share your perspective in the comments. At the time of this recording, the buzz around Supernatural Squad seems to be fading a bit, though it might flare up again depending on what happens next. In the end, one thing's clear. Whether intentional or not, Identity V may have another competitor on the horizon. And depending on how you look at it, more competition could either push developers to innovate, or just give us more fandom drama to watch unfold. Anyway, that's all I've got for now. If I missed something or got anything wrong, feel free to let me know in the comments. Thanks a ton for watching. And as always, this is Silmina, signing off.